The spring air tasted like champagne and roses. 500 guests sat beneath a canopy of cherry blossoms, their silk dresses and tailored suits gleaming under the afternoon sun. Photographers crouched behind elegant columns, their cameras ready to capture the moment that every society magazine had been waiting for. The wedding of Sienna Hartley, heiress to the Hartley Hotel empire, and Damien Cross. The brilliant tech entrepreneur who had built his company from nothing, Sienna stood at the altar. Her gown, a masterpiece of ivory lace that caught the light with every shallow breath. Her hands trembled as they clutched a bouquet of white peonies. She looked beautiful in the way that made people stop and stare, but if anyone had looked closer, they would have seen the fear swimming in her green eyes. Damien stood across from her, tall and steady in his black tuxedo. His dark hair was brushed back perfectly, and his smile was warm and confident. He looked at Sienna like she was the only person in the world. To him, she was. The minister opened his leather-bound book, his voice carrying across the garden. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Sienna Marie Hartley and Damien Alexander Cross." When everything changed, Sienna's mother, Juliet Hartley, sat in the front row wearing a cream suit and a smile that could cut glass. Her fingers rested on her pearl necklace, and her eyes watched her daughter with the intensity of a hawk. She had planned this wedding down to the smallest detail. Every guest, every flower, every photograph had been chosen to reflect the power and prestige of the Hartley name. Behind Damien, his business partner Natasha Rivers stood as a witness, her red dress bold against the soft pastels surrounding them. She watched the ceremony with an expression that seemed pleasant enough, but her jaw was tight. The minister continued through the traditional words, and then came the moment everyone waited for. "Damien Alexander Cross, do you take Sienna Marie Hartley to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do," Damien said, his voice clear and certain. The minister turned to Sienna. "Sienna Marie Hartley, do you take Damien Alexander Cross to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Sienna opened her mouth, but no words came. The guests leaned forward slightly. A breeze moved through the garden, causing the cherry blossoms to rain down like snow. Then Sienna stepped closer to Damien. She rose on her toes and brought her lips close to his ear. Her voice was barely a whisper, meant only for him. "I gave away my entire inheritance yesterday." The moment everything fell apart, Damien's face drained of color. His eyes went wide, searching hers for some sign that she was joking. But Sienna's expression held only honesty and terror. A murmur rippled through the crowd. People could not hear what she had said, but they could see something was terribly wrong. "What?" Damien whispered back, his voice cracking. "I'm sorry," Sienna breathed. "I'm so sorry." Then she dropped her bouquet. The white peonies scattered across the marble platform. Sienna gathered the heavy skirt of her gown in both hands and ran. She ran down the aisle, past her shocked mother, past the guests who gasped and stood and pulled out their phones. She ran through the garden path, her veil flying behind her like a flag of surrender. The photographers scrambled to follow, their cameras clicking frantically. Damien shouted, starting after her, but Juliet Hartley stood quickly, blocking his path. "Let her go," she said coldly. "She's made her choice." Damien stared at the woman who would have been his mother-in-law, then pushed past her and ran after Sienna, the love that started in shadows 6 months earlier. Sienna had been a different person. She wore her wealth like a costume she could never take off. Every morning she woke in a penthouse apartment overlooking the city. Every evening she attended charity galas where people smiled at her because of her last name. She felt hollow. One Thursday afternoon, she walked into a homeless shelter on the east side, far from the glittering world she knew. She had signed up to volunteer, needing to do something real, something that mattered. That was where she met Damien. He was serving soup, his sleeves rolled up, his hair messy. He was there completing community service hours after a minor traffic violation. He did not recognize her. He did not know about the Hartley Empire or the hotels that stretched across 5 continents. He just saw a woman with kind eyes, who was not very good at ladling soup without spilling it. "Here. Like this," he had said, guiding her hand gently. She had laughed, really laughed. For the first time in months, they talked while washing dishes. He told her about his company, how he was building communication software for schools in underserved areas. She told him about her love of photography, something she had given up years ago when her father told her it was not a serious career. They met again the next week, and the week after that. By the third month, they were meeting outside the shelter, walking through parks, sharing coffee in quiet cafes where no one knew either of their names. Damien fell in love with a woman named Sienna, who laughed too loud and cried during sad movies. Sienna fell in love with a man named Damien, who believed the world could be better and worked every day to make it so, the truth she discovered but 3 months into their relationship. Sienna found the documents. She had been going through her late father's office, preparing to donate his books, when she discovered a hidden drawer in his desk. Inside were files, contracts, emails, evidence of decades of labor violations, unpaid wages, workers threatened into silence. Her father, Thomas Hartley, the man the world praised as a visionary businessman, had built his empire by crushing the people who worked for him. Sienna spent weeks reading every document. She met with lawyers in secret. She learned that hundreds of families had suffered so that she could live in luxury. The guilt consumed her, so she made a choice. She liquidated her entire inheritance. Every account, every stock, every asset her father had left her. She created a compensation fund for the workers and their families. She signed away her fortune to correct the wrongs her family had committed, and then she ran from her own wedding, because she could not marry Damien without telling him the truth. She could not let him think he was marrying Anne, heiress, when she was now just a woman with nothing but her own 2 hands and a heart full of hope that love might be enough. Owen Blake's apartment smelled like old books and coffee that had gone cold hours ago. Sienna sat on his worn couch, still wearing her wedding dress. Mascara streaked down her cheeks like dark rivers. She had kicked off her heels somewhere between the garden and Owen's front door. Her feet were cut and bleeding from running barefoot through the city streets. Owen handed her a blanket and sat beside her. He had been her friend since childhood, back when they built forts in her father's hotel and dreamed about adventures beyond marble lobbies and crystal chandeliers. He was the only person she trusted completely. "Tell me everything," Owen said softly. Sienna pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "I destroyed everything. The wedding. Damien's trust. My mother will never forgive me." "Start from the beginning," Owen urged. "The documents that changed everything." Sienna took a shaky breath. 3 months ago, I found my father's secret files, hidden in his office behind a false panel. At first, I thought they were just old business documents. But then I started reading." Her voice cracked. "Owen, our hotels were built on suffering. Dad paid workers less than minimum wage. He threatened to deport undocumented employees if they complained. He blocked union organizing. People worked 16-hour days with no breaks. Some got injured and received no medical care. A few even died on the job, and he covered it up." Owen's face grew pale. "Sienna, I had no idea. Nobody did. He was so careful, so respected. Everyone called him a philanthropist because he donated to charities. But that money, it should have gone to the people he exploited." Sienna wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I found the names. Hundreds of them. People who gave years of their lives to make my family rich while their own children went hungry." She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city. "I spent weeks meeting with lawyers. I liquidated everything. My trust fund, my stock portfolios, my real estate holdings. I created a compensation fund. Every person my father hurt will receive what they're owed, plus interest." Owen stood beside her. "That must have been billions." 4.7 billion, Sienna whispered. "Gone, all of it. I kept nothing. The web of control, but that's not all," Sienna continued, turning to face Owen. "When I was setting up the fund, my lawyers discovered something else. Damien's company, the one he's so proud of building from scratch, it wasn't built from scratch at all." Owen's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" "My mother gave him the initial capital, $5 million, disguised as an investment from a shell corporation. But it wasn't an investment. It was a loan with very specific terms. Sienna's hands clenched into fists. Terms that said if he couldn't pay it back within 5 years, she would own controlling interest in his company. No, Owen breathed. Yes, and the 5 years are almost up. Damien's been working himself to exhaustion, trying to make the company profitable enough to pay her back. But the contract was designed to be impossible. My mother wanted control of his company, and she wanted him to marry me to seal the arrangement. Sienna sat back down, exhaustion weighing on her. She arranged everything. The chance meeting at the shelter wasn't chance at all. She knew I volunteered there. She made sure Damien was assigned community service at that exact location. She manipulated both of us. Owen paced the small apartment. Does Damien know? Not about my mother's manipulation, but I had to tell him about the money. I couldn't marry him while he thought I was an heiress. What if he only loved me for my fortune? What if this whole relationship was built on lies? Sienna, that man ran after you. That's not the action of someone who cares about money. Or maybe he's panicking because he just realized his meal ticket disappeared. Owen knelt in front of her. You don't believe that? I saw the way he looks at you, the pressure mounting across the city. Damien stood in his office, surrounded by chaos. His phone rang constantly. Investors were panicking. The wedding disaster was all over social media. Stock prices were dropping. Natasha Rivers burst into his office without knocking. We have a serious problem. I need to find Sienna, Damien said, grabbing his jacket. Forget about her. Natasha snapped. Our investors are threatening to pull out. The board wants an emergency meeting. Your little runaway bride just cost us millions. Damien turned to her slowly. Don't call her that, Damien. Be realistic. She humiliated you in front of 500 people. Whatever she whispered to you, it was clearly bad enough to make her run. Cut your losses. You don't understand? Then explain it to me. Natasha's voice rose. What could she possibly have said that was worth destroying everything you've built? Damien's jaw tightened. She told me she gave away her inheritance. Natasha went very still. All of it? Every penny, apparently. Strange expression crossed Natasha's face. Something between satisfaction and calculation. Then she's worthless to you now. And to her mother. Which means the leverage Juliet Hartley had over you just disappeared. What are you talking about? Natasha realized she had said too much. She tried to backtrack. Nothing. I just meant that without her money, there's no reason to marry her. I love her. That's the reason. Love doesn't pay back $5 million in loans, Natasha said coldly. Damien felt ice run through his veins. How do you know about the loan? Natasha's eyes flickered. I'm your business partner. I know everything about our finances. That loan was kept confidential. Only I knew the source. Damien stepped closer to her. Unless you've been working with Juliet Hartley. The silence between them spoke volumes. Get out, Damien said quietly. Damien, let me explain. Get out of my office. You're fired. Natasha's mask of concern fell away. You can't fire me. I own 30% of this company. 28%. And yes, I can. Damien moved to his desk and pulled out a file. I've been investigating our finances for months. You've been embezzling. Small amounts, but consistent. I have proof. Natasha's face went white, then red with fury. You'll regret this. I'll destroy you. You can try. Now leave before I call security. After she stormed out, Damien collapsed into his chair. His hands were shaking. Everything was falling apart. But somehow, he felt lighter than he had in years. He pulled out his phone and called Owen Blake. It rang 3 times before Owen answered. She's here, Owen said without preamble. And Damien, you should come alone. She needs to hear the truth from you. I'm on my way. The choice ahead. Sienna was trying to sleep on Owen's couch when she heard the knock. Her heart jumped into her throat. Owen opened the door, and there stood Damien. He looked exhausted. His tuxedo was wrinkled, his hair messy, his eyes red. Can I come in? He asked quietly. Owen looked at Sienna. She nodded slowly. Damien walked into the apartment and stopped a few feet away from her as if afraid to get too close. I'm sorry I didn't come sooner. I had some things to handle first. Damien, I'm so sorry, Sienna started, but he held up his hand. Please, let me talk first. He took a deep breath. I already knew about the inheritance. Sienna's eyes went wide. What? I've known for 2 weeks. I hired a private investigator when I noticed you were acting strange. I thought maybe you were having doubts about the wedding, but he discovered what you'd done with your father's files and the money. Tears filled Sienna's eyes. Then why didn't you say anything? Because I was waiting for you to tell me yourself. I wanted you to trust me enough to share it. Damien's voice was gentle, and I wanted you to know that I loved you before you found out that I knew. I don't understand. Damien sat down carefully beside her. I've known about your mother's manipulation for 3 months. I discovered the loan terms, how she'd orchestrated our meeting. I paid off the debt using a personal loan from a bank. I was going to tell you everything before the wedding. Sienna stared at him in shock. You paid it back? Every cent. I've been working night and day, selling assets, calling in favors. I freed myself from your mother's control. And I was going to call off the wedding myself. But why? Because I couldn't marry you while your mother had power over me. I needed you to know that my choice to marry you was completely free, that nobody was forcing my hand. Damien reached for her hand carefully. I don't care about your money, Sienna. I never did. I fell in love with a woman who cried watching street musicians, and who made terrible soup, and who laughed at my stupid jokes. Sienna's tears fell freely now. I thought you'd hate me. I could never hate you. What you did took incredible courage. You sacrificed everything to make things right. That's who you are. That's why I love you. Owen quietly excused himself to his bedroom, leaving them alone. Damien continued, I also fired Natasha today. She was working with your mother, feeding her information. They wanted us to fail. They wanted to control us, Sienna said softly. Yes, but they can't control us anymore. Damien squeezed her hand. We're free. Both of us. No money, no manipulation, no expectations. Just us, Sienna repeated, testing the words. The sunrise came through Owen's apartment window like a gentle promise. Sienna had finally fallen asleep around 3 in the morning. She curled up on the couch with Damien sitting on the floor beside her, his hand holding hers. Owen had given them privacy, spending the night in his bedroom with noise-canceling headphones and a firm belief that some conversations required sacred space. When Sienna woke, Damien was still there. His head rested against the couch cushion, his breathing slow and steady. She watched him for a moment, her heart swelling with something that felt both fragile and unbreakable. This man had known her secrets and loved her anyway. He had freed himself from manipulation and chosen her. When she had nothing left to offer but herself, she touched his hair gently and his eyes opened. For a moment, they just looked at each other. No words were needed. Everything had been said in the quiet hours of the night. Good morning, Damien whispered. Good morning, Sienna replied, her voice rough from crying. Owen emerged from his bedroom carrying 3 cups of coffee. I figured you'd both need this. Also, your mother has called me 17 times, Sienna, and the press is camped outside my building. Damien stood, stretching his stiff muscles. We need a plan. We need the truth to come out, Sienna said firmly. All of it. My father's labor violations, my mother's manipulation, Natasha's embezzlement, everything. Owen set down the coffee cups carefully. That's going to create a massive scandal. Your family name will be destroyed, good Sienna said without hesitation. That name was built on lies and suffering. It deserves to be destroyed. Damien sat beside her. Are you sure? Once we release this information, there's no taking it back. People deserve to know the truth. The workers deserve justice. And we deserve to live without all these secrets crushing us. The expose that shook the city 3 days later, Sienna and Damien held a joint press conference. Not in some fancy hotel ballroom, but in a simple community center where Sienna had once volunteered. The room was packed with journalists, cameras, and people who had worked for Hartley hotels over the years. Sienna stood at the podium, wearing jeans and a simple blue sweater. No designer clothes. No jewelry. Just herself. "My name is Sienna Hartley," she began, her voice steady. "And I'm here to tell you about the man the world called my father." For 40 minutes, she laid out everything. The documents. The violations. The covered-up injuries and deaths. The systematic exploitation of vulnerable workers. She named names. She showed evidence. She held nothing back. "I liquidated my entire inheritance to create a compensation fund for every person my father harmed. Every worker who was underpaid will receive what they're owed. Every family who lost someone will receive support. This is not charity. This is justice, and it's decades overdue." The room was silent except for the clicking of cameras. Then Damien stepped forward. "I'm Damien Cross, and I was manipulated into a relationship with Sienna by her mother, Juliet Hartley, who gave me a predatory loan disguised as an investment. She orchestrated our meeting and controlled my business for years. My former business partner, Natasha Rivers, was working with Juliet to ensure I would remain under her control." He looked directly into the cameras. "But I fell in love with Sienna anyway. Not because of any manipulation, but because she's the most courageous person I've ever met. She walked away from billions to do what was right. That's real wealth. That's real power." A journalist raised her hand. "Are you still planning to marry?" Sienna and Damien looked at each other and smiled. "We got married yesterday," Sienna said, holding up her left hand. A simple silver band glinted in the light. "At City Hall. With Owen Blake as our witness. No fancy dress. No 500 guests. Just two people who love each other making a promise." The room erupted with questions, but Sienna held up her hand. "I have one more thing to say. To anyone who thinks they have to choose between love and integrity, between family loyalty and doing what's right, I want you to know that you don't. You can walk away from corruption even when it's all you've ever known. You can build something new even when you have nothing. And you can find love that's real when you stop pretending to be someone you're not." The aftermath: Juliet Hartley was arrested 2 weeks later for fraud and labor law violations. Her empire crumbled as investors fled and lawsuits piled up. She refused to see Sienna, sending only one message through her lawyer: "You've destroyed everything I built." Sienna sent a message back: "I destroyed everything you stole." Natasha Rivers faced embezzlement charges and lost her stake in Damien's company. She tried to sell her story to tabloids, but nobody wanted to hear from the villain of the piece. The workers who had suffered under Thomas Hartley's regime began receiving their compensation. Some cried when they got the checks. Others showed up at the community center where Sienna volunteered just to say thank you. An elderly woman named Rosa, who had worked in Hartley hotels for 30 years, cleaning rooms for poverty wages, hugged Sienna so tight she could barely breathe. "Your father took so much from us," Rosa whispered. "But you gave it back. You gave us our dignity back." That moment meant more to Sienna than any amount of money ever could. Building something real 1 year later, Sienna and Damien stood in front of a new building in the neighborhood where they had first met. The sign above the door read Hartley Cross Community Center. It was not fancy. There were no marble floors or crystal chandeliers. But it had classrooms where people could learn job skills. It had a kitchen where families could get hot meals. It had a medical clinic where workers could get free health care. It had everything Sienna's father's empire should have provided, but never did. Damien's company had recovered after Natasha's departure. He had restructured it as a benefit corporation, ensuring that profit would never again take priority over people. He worked reasonable hours now. He came home for dinner. He and Sienna would cook together in their small apartment, laughing when they burned things, dancing in the kitchen to music from her phone. Owen had become the center's director, using his background in social work to help people navigate resources and rebuild their lives. He watched Sienna and Damien with satisfaction, knowing he had been right all along. Their love was real. It had survived the test of truth on the anniversary of their courthouse wedding. Sienna and Damien sat on the steps of their community center as the sun set over the city. She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Do you ever regret it?" Damien asked. "Giving up all that money?" Sienna thought about the question seriously. She thought about the penthouse apartment she no longer owned. The private jets she no longer flew. The designer clothes hanging in closets she would never see again. Then she thought about Rose's hug, about the children learning to read in their classrooms, about coming home to Damien every night and knowing their love was built on truth, not manipulation or money. Not for a single second, she said. Damien kissed the top of her head. Good, because I have a confession to make. Sienna sat up, serious. Another secret? I'm terrible with money. We're probably going to eat a lot of ramen noodles. Sienna laughed, the sound bright and free. I love ramen noodles, liar. Okay, I hate ramen noodles. But I love you. And that's enough. Damien pulled her close. It's more than enough. It's everything. As darkness fell over the city, lights began to glow in the community center windows. Inside, people were learning, eating, healing, and building new lives. Outside, a woman who had given up a fortune and a man who had freed himself from control sat together. Their love story just beginning. They had lost everything in the world, valued and gained everything that mattered, and they would spend the rest of their lives proving that love, when built on truth and courage, could rewrite any destiny.